For years, this locomotive has sat on a shelf. Not because I did not like trains. I did. I like trains enough to buy that UP 2702 in NScale. It just sat there. Because between owning the train and actually running the train, I just kept treating it like one giant problem. Too much space, too much money, too many tools I did not have, too much woodworking, and no DCC command station. Then I saw Union Pacific's big boy number 414 running through town again this year. Something clicked. Big Boy is out on a historic 2026 coast-to-coast tour for America's 250th birthday, and seeing it in person brought back an interest that had been sitting still for a couple of years. If you mostly know me from other projects, this may seem like it came out of nowhere. I like trains. It was more of a hobby I would touch every now and then, put away, and then think about it again later. That is where this story really starts. For years, model railroading felt like something I wanted to do, but could not quite justify starting. I felt like I needed more space, more money, more tools, more woodworking skill, and more confidence before I could really begin. 3D printing and OpenSCAD. Instead of waiting until I could buy everything or build everything the traditional way, I started designing my way into the hobby, one piece at a time. A few years ago, I found there was just one problem. I didn't own any NScale track. I didn't own a DCC controller. This locomotive, that rolling stock, all on NScale, and the idea of building it just sat on the shelf. The hobby looked expensive. Track, controllers, modules, scenery, electronics, it all felt like a big financial barrier. I did not start with the perfect layout, a perfect shop, or a perfect budget. I started with the problem that I cared about. One barrier at a time, the hobby stopped feeling impossible. Why NScale? You already had HO scale. And this can be a controversial, and depending on who you ask, I might be wrong, but from my perspective, NScale just looks cool. You can fit more railroad into less space, longer trains, broader scenes, more operation, and more possibilities without needing an entire room. If I wanted to stay interested in the hobby, I needed something compact, modular, and easy to pull out when I had time. I also like the idea of building modules. This led me to T-Track. Problem with T-Track though, T-Track makes a lot of sense. Even there, I still kind of ran into a barrier. I still had to build the modules. I could cut the wood, glue everything together, and build them myself, but I just kept putting it off. I just didn't do it. There are kits you can buy, and some of them look great, but again, I'm just trying to keep this hobby affordable while I'm still learning, still getting into it. I'm still new to this. I do not want to take out a second mortgage just to start another one of my mini hobbies. Even though T-Track is compact compared to a full room layout, it is still a little large. That is when I discovered HexTrak. HexTrak sits in a really interesting place. It's bigger than a tiny pocket diorama Kato came out with, but smaller, more flexible than the kind of module I was originally imagining, like a Fremont or a T-Track. Instead of rectangles, the modules are hexagons, and that opens up a lot of fun layout possibilities, kind of like Settlers of Catan from model railroading. The creator of HexTrak seemed to be solving the same problem I had. T-Track is great, but it can still feel large when you're short on space. There are HexTrak kits available. I wanted to keep the cost down. I thought about cutting modules from wood. I just kept putting it off. I didn't like the idea of gluing the feet on the modules to get the perfect 12mm height. Then I remembered something obvious. I have a 3D printer. So when I went looking for printable HexTrak files, and really to my surprise, I didn't find anything. I didn't find what I needed. I opened OpenSCAD and started designing my own printable HexTrak mod. A hexagon's a pretty simple shape, and the hex standard calls for a 248mm flat to flat hexagon with the top of the module sitting 12mm off the table. In OpenSCAD, I started with a basic hexagon shape. Then I added 6 feet so the module would sit at the correct height. That gave me my first basic hex module. And this is where I started feeling less like I was waiting to become a model railroader and more like I was making myself a path into the hobby. There was another practical problem. My printer is a 250 cubed, and in reality that usable space is a lot closer to just 230mm cubed. A full hexagon tile is too large to print in one piece. It's 248mm. Practically, the next step was just splitting the hexagon in half. I updated the OpenSCAD file so I could print a left half and then a right half. Each side has its own feet, and the halves can be joined back together after printing. That made the idea more realistic. So once I could print the module, I had to solve the next problem. How do I make sure the Kato Unitrack lands in the right place? The track needs to line up with the center of the module. If that alignment is off, the module will not connect cleanly. I found an STL online for clips that hold Kato Unitrack to benchwork, so I modified the idea to work within my hexagon. The OpenSCAD file can place track clips on selected sides of the module. I also added options for single, double, or triple track spacing. At first, I made the tile 248mm across, but in real life, that actually caused a problem. If I did not glue the Kato Unitrack perfectly, tolerances got just a little too tight when connecting track between modules. I changed the printed module to 246 millimeters. That 2mm difference gave me a little more room to work with, still keeping the system practical for my setup. It gives you just enough of a tolerance to be able to make it just a little bit of a mistake, and the modules still fit together perfectly. The model railroad became the reason to learn, and the learning became the reason the railroad could exist. I needed a better way to glue the two halves together. Technically, I could line them up by hand, but I wanted something just a little bit more repeatable. So I designed a gluing jig. The jig interlocks with feet from each half and holds the parts in alignment while the glue sets. I also found that adding a center foot helped with stability. The module was too big to print, so again, I split it up. The track needed alignment, so I added clip placement. The halves needed glue straight, so I made a jig. The towel needed still more stable, so I added a center foot. Little by little, this stopped being just a model railroad project and became a maker project. Sometimes the thing that gets you into a hobby is not only the hobby itself. Sometimes it's the tools around it. For me, OpenSCAD, 3D printing. Isn't it funny using a hobby to help you get into another hobby, or using a hobby that's more expensive to get into a hobby cheaper? Once I had printable modules, I could finally get to the fun part, making little scenes. I decorated a few modules, but I made a campground scene complete with the Bigfoot Easter egg. I made a modular home scene. I made a small water crossing. My offspring helped me create a cabin scene. That is what I really like about this style of modular diorama. Each module is small enough that it does not feel overwhelming, and I can finish a scene. That is what I really like about this style of modular diorama. Each module is small enough that it does not feel overwhelming. I can finish a scene without committing months of work to it. It is also fairly cheap because I can just use the supplies I already have. At the same time, it gives me some room to improve. After seeing the quality of scenery at railroad shows, I definitely want to invest in some better scenery supplies. And then there's the 3D printing rabbit hole. Rolling stock, building, scenery, shipping containers. I started printing it all. That probably deserves our dedicated video, so let me know if you're interested in that. Moving on to the DCC EX command station. At this point, I had a way to build the world. I had modules, I had track, I had scenes. I still had no way to control my DCC locomotive. That led me to DCC EX. I followed the DCC EX project to build a command station using a Wemos ESP32 and an Arduino R3 motor driver shield. Here's a quick version of what it does. The command station is basically the brain of the module railroad. It lets me connect with my phone, program DCC locomotives, and control the train. There is something extremely satisfying about pressing a button on my phone and hearing the locomotive horn blast through its scene. It has lights, sound, functions, and a little bit of personality. I still like DC. DC has its place, and I can still run DC trains with this setup. But DCC gives me the kind of interaction I wanted when I bought that NScale locomotive years ago. And the best part is that I did not have to buy a huge expensive commercial system to get started. So where is this going? So this is where the project is right now. Big Boy pulled me back into the hobby. NScale made the hobby fit my space. HexTrak made the layout modular and manageable. OpenSCAD and 3D printing helped me design the modules I could not find. And DCC EX finally gave me a way to bring the locomotive to life. That is the moral of the story for me. I like trains already, but STEM is what helped me actually do something with that interest. It took a hobby I had been putting off for years and turned it into a series of smaller problems I could solve. Design a tile, split the print, align the track, glue the halves, build the command station, and keep improving. And there's still plenty more to go. I still have a lot I want to build. I want to make a cement factory. I want a main street. I want a port scene with a cargo ship. More shipping containers. Eventually, I would love to build a working container crane that can move shipping containers around the port, controlled either through command station or another do-it-yourself setup. That is the exciting part of this project. It started with one locomotive sitting on a shelf, and now it feels like the beginning of an entire little railroad world. If you are interested in the HexTrak files, the OpenSCAD design process, or DCC EX command station, or even the 3D printed scenery rabbit hole, let me know what you want to see next. The HexTrak OpenSCAD files are linked in the description, so feel free to check them out. Let me know if you make anything. And if you have been putting off a hobby because it feels too expensive, too big, or too complicated, maybe there's a way to use the tools or the hobbies you already have to make the first step smaller. For now, I'm just happy that UP 2702 is finally off the shelf, and it actually has somewhere to run. Until next time.